I want to add my voice to all of the accolades that have been expressed today to Senator Cornyn and Senator Klobuchar for giving a voice to the victims of the most horrific crime that occurs in our country. And those are the victims of human trafficking. Without their hard work, without their advocacy, we would not be debating this on the floor of the United States Senate. And so it is so important to acknowledge that work and to advance the cause by working together. Today I want to speak to Amendment 290, which is the Collins-Leahy Runaway and Homeless Youth Amendment. And I want to thank Senator Collins and Senator Leahy for being such fierce advocates for runaway and homeless youth. I have had years of experience working with victims and vulnerable youth. And I can tell you, based on this experience, this amendment is the most critical piece that we are considering today to truly address prevention and early intervention for a population that is the most susceptible to being trafficked, and that is the population of runaway and homeless youth. It is a story, I believe, that's too often told. It's a story of a runaway and homeless youth engaging in survival sex, being coerced into criminal activity by people offering nothing more than a roof over their head or maybe even a meal. Since 1995, North Dakota has received $11.5 million in this very critical and important prevention program. How many of these children have we rescued from a life of despair? We will never know, but I am certain telling those stories and visiting them in the shelters and in their apartments that are transitory living situations, that they would otherwise be so extraordinarily vulnerable. And I have heard firsthand the stories of these homeless and runaway youth. And the stories that you hear literally are heartbreaking. Prior physical, mental, and sexual abuse. See, these runaway and homeless youth have already been devalued. They've already been told that they are not worth what other children are worth. They have substance addictions. They have been shunned by their family or communities for who they are and how they identify. They are the most marginalized children in our country. Last July, a 13-year-old runaway from Minneapolis was picked up by her traffickers in the cities and then worked her way across. She was heading out to the oil patch in western North Dakota. She stopped in Fargo-Moorhead to make some money on the way, being trafficked by a man who was selling a 13-year-old for sex online through Backpages.com. Fargo-Moorhead law enforcement set up a sting and rescued the victim and arrested the trafficker. Just 2 weeks ago, another tragic story of a 14-year-old runaway from Las Vegas. Parents didn't know where she was. She got mixed up in the wrong crowd. She was put in a car and taken to Minot, North Dakota. Her mother, desperate to find her, searched through her email records, found a connection to Backpage, saw that her daughter was being advertised on Backpage in Minot, North Dakota, called the local authorities. The local authorities were able to rescue her. She was rescued with a 16-year-old and returned to Las Vegas. She's now with her mother. The 16-year-old got off the plane and ran. No hope for her, no place to return that was welcoming, no mother who searched for her on the internet and found her. As we work through these stories, I want you to think about what is the common element. What is the common factor? You look behind these stories and you will see in these stories of trafficking, you will see runaway and homeless youth. Runaway and homeless youth, vulnerable on the street, susceptible to a warm bed, susceptible to a hot meal, susceptible to any kind of love and comfort they can find, only to find out that it might be their worst nightmare. And they're trapped, and where do they go? Where do they go if there's not a program for runaway and homeless youth? Where do they go if there isn't someone reaching out a hand? So what's become common recurring fact of these offenders or these victims is that they've been thrown away or they're runaways. 40%, we estimate, of these children identify themselves as gay, lesbian, transgender, or bisexual youth. If we pass an amendment that doesn't have protection for this population, that doesn't have protection for these children, what is the message? The message is the message that's been reinforced their entire life, which is that they are not worthy of help. They're not worthy of being treated as all other children are. And so this Senate will reinforce the recurring message that is so tragically identified and so tragically delivered to these children every day. And I urge my colleagues, I beg my colleagues, to please recognize the worth of all children. Recognize the vulnerability of this population of children. Vote with us to support the Leahy-Collin Amendment. It is so critical to sending the right message, so critical to getting the right services, but so critical to sending the right message that all children matter, and that we in the United States Senate do not see or discriminate. What we do is we help provide shelter to the most vulnerable among us. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor back to Senator Collins.